The crimes I've committed, which are free speech crimes, hate speech, that's what they call it, I've already accepted the sentence for that. What's the point in keeping me alive for democracy's sake if I'm no longer able to participate in democracy? By far the greatest threat to Denmark, it's Islam. And that's why I haven't gone into a whole cultural debate on where does democracy work. The point here is that most of the people in the world, and certainly most Muslims by far, they don't really like democracy. And right now I am de facto a prisoner. I'm certainly a well-looked after prisoner. He took out a knife like this and went against me to kill me, and then he was shot.
He was shot?
By the police.
Because the police were with you?
Yeah. Everybody who's not a Danish citizen who has committed a crime will get a letter. You have 14 days to go home. And if not, the police will put you on a plane.
Do you think the average person that I approach in the street of Denmark will have any idea of what's actually in that book?
Absolutely not. And I also think that when you tell them, they will think you're lying.
Information covered up, censorship, corruption. The mainstream media have proven itself to be untrustworthy. I'm here to give a platform for debate, for truth, for open discussion. I'm introducing you to my podcast, Silenced with Tommy Robinson.
Who exactly is Tommy Robinson, or Stephen Yaxley-Lane?
With the English Defence League, the EDL.
The problem is with Islamic
The English far-right Islamophobic activism.
Since then, there's been organised protests across the country in London, Manchester, Leeds. People in their thousands are marching for Robinson's cause.
There is no such thing in this country as a Muslim.
Free Tommy Robinson!
Rasmus Paludan is a Danish-Swedish politician, lawyer and anti-Islam activist. He is considered to be far-right and right-wing extremist by political and news medias who usually lie about people. He is the leader of the Danish political party Stram Kurs, translated as Hard Line, which he founded in 2017. He has held numerous demonstrations in which he has burned the Quran, leading to counter-protests across the world. He is currently wanted by Turkish authorities after having burned the Quran in front of the Turkish embassy in Stockholm, as well as being banned from entering the UK after threatening to burn a copy of the Quran in the city of Wakefield. Paludan is under constant police protection due to threats against him for his activism. We're in Copenhagen, and our first appointment today is we're getting picked up by security services. We've had to liaise with the security services because there's a gentleman who lives here who keeps setting fire to the Quran, and he now lives in protective custody of the police. His life's under threat, and the security services are picking us up at 11:30 and taking us to meet him at a hotel. So we'll understand why he's burning the Quran. And in Denmark, they're now trying to pass a new law, a blasphemy law, that you're not allowed to burn religious books. We all know by religious books they mean the Quran, because no one wants to kill anyone. They now said it's a matter of national security, because there's lots of Muslims who now live here who want to blow shit up and kill everyone if they insult their prophet or insult their religion. So it's that's the first guest, so let's go. Hello. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Danish police?
Danish police,
yeah.
Okay.
You
cool.
have a cameraman with you?
My cameraman's just coming now.
Okay.
Currently being brought to a secret location by the security services. They've protected him for 2 years. So we've been brought to a room, police guards at the door. We're just making it so we can get our podcast set up. We've asked for another chair, and when we're ready, they'll bring Rasmus in. Ex-military police protection. Rasmus, thank you for joining me today for my podcast, Silenced.
Very, very much my pleasure.
So to meet you, I've had to give my passport, my videographer's passport. We've then been picked up at a gun range by ex-military, who are now police officers, protection officers. They've pretty much strip searched us, gone through our bags, gone through our cameras. Then that's drove us to this undisclosed location where there's 2 men outside the door with firearms, because we wish to meet you. What's brought us? I want to understand. I obviously know who you are. I know your history of what you've done, but I want to understand who you are for this podcast to get to your life, what's brought you to living in these conditions. So briefly, just catch on, what circumstances are you living under now?
I mean, to do it very briefly, in 2019, I was running for Parliament in Denmark. And on the 14th of April, which is that year Easter Sunday, I was doing a protest in one of the more ethnic boroughs of Copenhagen. And this resulted in a great amount of violence against, well, it was supposed to be against me, but I was evacuated, so it was against the police, and they burned down the street, more or less. And 2 days after that, I was informed that now the threat against my person, because of my legal political statements, was such that the Danish government had to protect me with bodyguards. So that was on the 16th of April 19, and since then, that has been the case. But of course, during that time, it isn't like static. The threat level can go up and it can go down.
Okay.
And right now, unfortunately, because I'm now famous or infamous in the world, and certainly in the Muslim world, the threat level is very high. And so the precautions that the Danish government has taken to protect my life, which in essence is to protect democracy. They don't care so much about me, but they do care about the fact that democracy only works if you don't get killed for making political statements. That's why the threat level is so high, and that's why the protection level is equal.
Okay, but some people have been killed for making political statements across the world as well. Even in Holland, if you look at the filmmaker, the Dutch filmmaker,
2 Dutch filmmakers,
Pim Fortuyn
and the
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh, yeah. But I mean, the thing is, there's no guarantee here. It's like some people, they're very angry and they say, you only dare say what you're saying because you're protected by bodyguards. And there are 2 points I want to make on that slur, which is, one, I was saying what I'm saying long before I was protected by bodyguards, which is also why I've been attacked by Muslims many times, because not only when I've had bodyguards, but also before I've been attacked by Muslims because of my statements. And 2, this is not like a guaranteed game. It's not like if you have protection officers, then you're not going to be killed. Yeah. You can get killed anyway. I mean, we could be bombed right now and we all die. So there is no guarantee here, but I have my reasons, but it's just foolish to think that because you're surrounded by police officers and because the government is doing what it can to protect you, then you're not going to be killed. You can be killed anyway. What's
life like to be surrounded by police officers? Can you go to the gym? Can you just pick up and walk down the shops?
Well, certainly that depends on the threat level. And if we look at the usual threat level, which is I'm at my home threat level, then I'm surrounded by bodyguards whenever I'm out of my home, and my home is in a state that it cannot be attacked.
In the sense
that would be unsuccessful. I mean, the protections are such that if somebody tried to attack me in my home, they would not succeed.
Is that with the support of the government?
That is with the support of the government, okay. Absolutely.
As in panic rooms, bomb-proof, everything?
I would rather not say,
okay, of course.
People can speculate, and I'm fine with them doing that. But basically, that the normal threat level, then I'm protected by bodyguards from the security service whenever I'm outside or away from my home, so to speak. And there is a large amount of normal, what we call the blue police, the uniform police, or plainclothes regular police that will also be involved, depending on the circumstances. If it's like a public event, certainly the regular police will be involved as well. They have the special kind of police, the tactical units that have the long rifles and the bulletproof helmets and such. They're like the outer perimeter usually. So
they'll be on the roofs?
They will be different places. That depends on the situation. But that would be like the regular threat level. Right now, of course, unfortunately, we're at an extreme threat level, and that means that things are not normal.
Because they seem like special forces, the officers here. They seem...
I mean, the situation right now is that it is not safe for me to be seen very much in public, unfortunately. And I think that's a big problem. I think the government should use more resources so that I can be seen in public, but they're not willing to do that for various reasons. And so right now, what they're trying to do is hide me a lot from the public eye, and prevent me from being in my home and having me at undisclosed locations. And of course, this is a great intrusion in my private life, and not in the long run acceptable at all. What I spoke to you about, like the regular threat level, that was acceptable because I could have whatever guests I wanted, and I could, within reason, do what I wanted. I could go out and enjoy the nightlife if I wanted, within reason, and that was fine. But the current situation is not fine. I am always being denied. If I want to make a public gathering, I'm being denied, and if I want to do something in public, I'm being denied. And of course, this is not acceptable because it's not like I get the choice. It's like if you do it anyway, then we leave, and then I'll risk being killed. Okay, well that's your choice. Okay, well.
Is that what they're saying?
That's what they're saying, and it's not like I mean, I have. My actions speak for themselves in that I'm not really a person who is easily scared. I'm really not. But there are two things. First of all, if I'm killed, then that's a great setback for Denmark and the fight against Islam and the protection of the Danish people. And two, it's just not fair rules because I don't have firearms, and the people who want to kill me, they do have firearms. So it's not playing on an even field, and that's very unfair. So that's why I'm forced to accept the rules set by the people of the government who do have firearms. And if the government said the law is now that you can have your own militia and they can have as many firearms as they want, then it would be a more even playing field. But it's not. So I have to, unfortunately, at the moment, I have to accept the rules set down by the government, and that limits my political options of expression greatly.
Do you feel like a prisoner? Do you feel like now?
And right now I am de facto a prisoner. I'm certainly a well-looked after prisoner. I'm not a prisoner who is like demeaned with strip searches and whatever they do in actual prison. But it's certainly emasculating and demeaning to be treated this way because I haven't committed a crime.
This is because of your speech?
This is because of my speech, and it's not because I've committed a crime. The crimes I've committed, which are free speech crimes, hate speech, that's what they call it, I've already accepted the sentence for that. I didn't agree. I certainly don't agree. But, I wear that like a badge of honor because if you have to give me a punishment for saying my political opinion, that's fine. But I shouldn't be kept here based on legal statements. And that's the case because nobody's making the argument that I am now protected and kept away from my daily life because I made illegal statements. No, they're accepting that I made legal statements.
But legal statements, but they believe you will be killed, so there's a high risk to your life.
That's the ball game, and I can see why, I can certainly see why they think that. Obviously, they never tell me the real intelligence they have. I mean, that's the nature of an intelligence service. They don't disclose that. But the thing is, I think they should allocate more resources because what's the point in keeping me alive for democracy's sake if I'm no longer able to participate in democracy?
Yeah, or live.
Yeah.
Or live. See, it's different. So in the UK, I've been given Osman warnings by the British government, which set an Osman warning in the UK is a warning to a threat to life. But when they've come to me, they've just given me saying, we cannot protect you 24/7, we advise you. Well, this when I was living in Luton at the start of the English Defence League. We cannot protect you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We advise you to leave this area for the future. That was their advice. No protection, never been offered protection. I was offered actually a name change when we first started our activism to relocate and change our life, but we'd have to stop our activism. But I've never been given, I think here, because Lars Hedegaard's had round-the-clock protection as well. In Europe, there seems to be from the government an element to protect its citizens who are expressing their free speech, certainly here in Denmark.
I think it's very interesting, and I think there are probably 3 observations I would make, and obviously it's just my impression, so it could be totally wrong. But the one is that I think the UK is a lot more Islamized than Denmark is, and
certainly in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
I walk around here. It's
certainly that can have an influence, and I don't know, but I think I've pissed off worse people than you've pissed off. You certainly pissed off a lot of people, but it seems like I maybe gone out of my way to really piss off the wrong people, in that gang criminals and international terrorists have been really pissed off. And of course, different dictators in Muslim countries. Turkey.
We'll get onto that.
Yeah.
Go through all of it.
So that may be. I mean, certainly, I think you should be protected by the British government. There's no question, but it could be that it's even worse people that are after me. That could be, at least now. But
especially now, because
now,
your activism is.
And the third point is not really something to do with the British government, but more that I think you should consider yourself fortunate that you're not more streetwise than I am. So I think your ability to protect yourself is a lot better. Because I've tried, I'm a lawyer. I'm not really into, I did some jiu-jitsu when I was a teenager, but that's that. When I've tried to protect myself, they've charged me. So, and that's like, okay, so if I don't protect myself, I risk a real good beating or death. But if I do protect myself,
you're prosecuting me.
I'm prosecuted.
Can we rewind? Let's just get up. We'll rewind. We'll get onto all this. I want to get onto the Quran burning, everything. But to understand who you are, you was brought up in Denmark, but Swedish mother?
Yes. The thing is, north of Copenhagen is a reasonably nice area of Denmark. At least it was, and I think it still is. A little bit further north is also reasonably nice. I mean, the really rich people live just north, but then further north, normal people can also live reasonably nice lives. So, of course, I was born in '82, so
That's
yeah. You're only my junior by 6 months.
Okay.
But there wasn't really any Muslims in my childhood. I mean, that didn't exist. There were, for a few years in elementary school, a guy from Lebanon. And I really didn't know whether he was Muslim or not, because it didn't really interest me. But he wrote me 20 years later, I'm actually not Muslim, I'm a Lebanese Catholic. So that's funny, but it's just to
illustrate. He probably fled when the Islamic Revolution was.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, that wasn't an issue, because that was what I want for Denmark. That was my childhood, which is a mono-ethnic state, really, because we know from history and from anthropology and sociology and psychology and history, as I said, that people, they have the most harmony and happiness when they live with people that are like themselves. And they have the most disharmony if they live with people that are the opposite of themselves. This is not something new. We know this. This is why in Rwanda and in former Yugoslavia it didn't work out, because people were different, so they started killing each other. And I grew up like quite happily, I guess. And then it really didn't occur to me that there were a problem until I started studying law here in Copenhagen.
So you left school and you went to university to study law.
And then, I did a quick stop in the army also. But when I started studying law and I experienced more of the
law and theology, is that what you studied?
I've studied theology afterwards, yeah, but okay. I have a master's degree in law, and I have also completed the bar exam, so that's why I work as a lawyer. But
okay.
There were people that acted a lot differently from what I had been taught and from what I had experienced with my friends. And this troubled me deeply, because I could sense immediately that their values and their norms were completely different from mine.
Where did you sense this? Where did you meet these?
Well, I met them in...
This was at university?
Not so much at university,
Okay.
because to be honest, at that time there weren't really many Muslims studying there. I can't really recall that there were other than white Danes there when I started law in 2001.
Okay.
But of course now it's different. But not that different, because as you might well know, it's not like the Muslims are not that much into university. Let's put it like that. So
They are in the UK.
yeah. So they are. Yeah.
They are in the UK.
But I mean, certainly I experienced a lot, and I started looking at what's going on in Europe, and that I wouldn't say it frightened me, but it certainly surprised me. So already in the beginning of this millennia, I found out that people are different, and that there are really differences that are so great that there is no compromise. And certainly, if I were to meet a Pole or a German or a Norwegian or a Swede or something, a British person, a real British person, that would be possible, because our way of life is very much related. It's not that different.
Culturally very similar.
Very, very similar, based on Christianity and based on science, and based on the democratic ideals of the French Revolution, really. But what many Danes don't understand is that it's not like the whole world is like that. And as a matter of fact, most of the world is not. And then if you're able to convince the Danes of this, which is difficult, but if you are, then their response will be, well, that might be so, but they want to be like us. And then I have to say, no, they don't. They really don't. Certainly a few do, but most don't. And that's why when you try to make democracy in Iraq, it doesn't work.
When you say they, you mean followers of Islam?
I mean, for the most part, followers of Islam, absolutely. But I mean, I wouldn't say that it's exclusively followers of Islam, because I would say that some cultures, even non-Muslim cultures, can have a problem with accepting. Well, let's put it like that. The great professor Helmut Nyborg, he has said that it seems like if you look at a country with an IQ average of less than 90, democracy doesn't work. So it's not Islam is the only thing, but certainly.
Which other cultures would you alleviate to there?
If you look at Africa,
Okay.
There's not really a lot of African countries that are great democracies, regardless of their religion. So certainly it's more than just Islam, but when you look at by far the greatest threat to Denmark, it's Islam. And that's why I haven't gone into a whole cultural debate on where does democracy work. The point here is that most of the people in the world, and certainly most Muslims by far, they don't really like democracy. And why should they?
They don't want
Because it goes against what they've been taught is the truth from God. So how can you be a Muslim and subscribe to everything the Quran says as the word of God and still want democracy? Those do not, fit. So that's what I found out, and I'm just trying to explain to the Danes that no, they might speak Danish, but they don't really like the things that we like. And that's, so far has been greatly unsuccessful. So that's what happened, I guess, in this very short, brief history lesson.
History lesson. So you left university. You just said you got a master's. You went on to set up a law firm. Did you? You become a lawyer?
I set up my own law firm. I mean, basically, you have to do an apprenticeship first to become a lawyer. So you have to certainly do some exams, but you also have to work in general 3 years for a person who's already a lawyer. So that's what I did, and then I set up my own law firm, and I did that in 2014. I did stuff in the meantime as well. I mean, already when I was in university, I did 6 months in The Hague at the International Criminal Court for the prosecutor there. And of course, the reason I'm mentioning that is because if you're in doubt that people in the world are different, certainly if you worked there, you found out they're quite different. Not just that you have colleagues from all over the world, and you can see that they're different, but also the things I was investigating, which at the time was things happening in Uganda, with something called the Lord's Resistance Army, which has become quite well known afterwards, but at that time nobody knew of Joseph Kony. And it's just like...
What is that? The Lord's Resistance Army?
Lord's Resistance Army is basically a rebel group in Uganda. And what they do is they fight the government of Museveni. I think Museveni is actually not the president any longer, but that doesn't matter. But basically, they kidnap children and then they rape them and then they make them into child soldiers.
Make them into soldiers, okay, yeah. And then they become massive. So you was onto that before, because everyone now, yeah, okay. Okay, so the point I want to make, or want to get across, you went on to then become a lawyer to defend people who challenge the establishment. In my research, that's what I've come across.
Well, certainly that was a big part of my portfolio of clients. It wasn't the only part. I mean, I also defended foreigners, which has been a great gift for me, because I had certainly already made my impression of what the problems are, but when I found out the kind of people who come here and ask for asylum and whatnot, it certainly gave me a more detailed, factual background to state that we have a problem. And this is not something that's like rocket science, because Elysium is a film that's with Matt Damon that was made like 10 years ago. And basically it says, in the future, the world's gone to hell. The world has already gone to hell. But in the future, there's this space station where all the rich people live, and they live in harmony on the space station, and the rest of the world is shit. And that space station is called Elysium. And that's basically what we have already, because a lot of countries in Europe, they are that space station compared to the rest of the world, certainly compared to many places in Africa and Asia. And so people will do pretty much anything to get here, to get a piece of that. And so lying about their situation is nothing to be granted the opportunity to have a better life. And of course, if we accept all the people who lie to us, and that's pretty much all of them, then what will happen is they will not get a better life, and neither will we, because we will deplete our resources, and then we cannot help anybody, and we cannot help ourselves.
Do you blame them for that, the migrants?
I blame the government, because the migrants are just doing, what everybody would do.
Yeah,
so I mean, how can you blame someone for wanting a better life and lying for that? Nobody really can blame one for that. So I'm not saying my clients lied. I'm just I'm not stating anything about my clients. I'm just saying that
you're not allowed to, no?
Yeah, it's a general. Obviously, people will lie about whatever, and that's why, I mean, the government has learned a little bit, because now before, every single male from Africa said he was a homosexual.
Yeah.
So now,
and it's from a country where it's punishable for being homosexual, so they can't go back.
And then now the government says, well, that's fine, but you can only have asylum if you can prove that the government is after you specifically for being a homosexual.
Okay.
So I mean, they're learning a bit, but it's just, it's a great problem. There are two different problems here. One is everybody wants to come here, and two is many of those who want to come here have perceptions and rules for how to behave that are completely incompatible with how we live. Okay, if you insult me, I will laugh and say, okay, well, that's your opinion. Yeah, but that would never be acceptable for a Muslim, because if someone insults you, you have to hit them, And remember this great story about elementary school in Netherlands where a Moroccan family were called to school because their son had beat up a Dutch boy, really beat him up, so he was bleeding and had to go to the hospital. and the teacher said, your boy has really wounded this other boy, and that's not acceptable. And then the parents said, well, the Dutch boy teased our boy. He said he was stupid. And then the teacher said, well, that's possible, but
the response is not acceptable.
You cannot respond by beating him up and almost killing him. And then the parents said, well, you're wrong. We've taught our boy that, of course, if anybody says anything to demean him, he must immediately beat the crap out of that person. So this is, if they want to do that in Morocco, I'm really not going to meddle with that. They can do what they want in their own countries. And of course, I could say as an objective observer that it's not going very well for them with their culture in their own countries. So maybe, it's not a great culture. That's a point. But they shouldn't do it here. And that's a problem because they want to do it here. And even the people who don't want to do it here, they're doing it anyway. And with that, I'm saying it's very difficult to change what you are. Because if you and we went together as friends to Afghanistan, then in Afghanistan, they have part of the culture is that rich people, they buy boys and then they have sex with them. We wouldn't do that. I mean, even if we lived there for 10 years or 20 years, we wouldn't do that because our European values are not like that. So if we cannot change when we live in their country, isn't it maybe strange to think that they would change when they come here?
I get that because people, they think you're in a cave in Afghanistan one day and the next day they're in Europe and they think the next day they're in the bank next to me in Luton Town and they think every value is just going to have vanished and they're going to have changed.
That's not going to happen. And we had a great, I wouldn't say great, we had a famous poet here, Yahya Hassan, who was a Palestinian who died a few years ago. He died in 20. And he was very famous for a while. And what he did was he published lyrics where he really trashed his upbringing. He told about his father being on social welfare and beating the crap out of him, and all the other people, being hypocrites because they subscribed to the Arab values, and still they did all the things you're not supposed to do with the Arab values and the Muslim values and so on. So he really told the truth about what he was experiencing in his own social circle. Of course, that didn't make him popular in his own social circle. But the problem is also that all the things he criticized with all the friends he had and stuff, he was that as well. He
was what?
He was also that. He had all the characteristics that he criticized them for because he couldn't escape from what he was. So he criticized their violence.
But he was violent.
And he criticized their non-Muslim behavior, and he did everything the same because he couldn't really escape. So this is interesting because he was a brave person in that he was a gifted poet. I'm surprised that with his upbringing he could do what he did. But even with all this, which is like amazing that he was able to publish good poetry and really point the finger at his upbringing and his social circle and the Muslim society that he was a part of, even with all that. And he was invited into the best of homes of high society in Denmark. And with all of that, he couldn't escape what he was.
And did he admit that?
I don't think he ever realized that. I don't think he ever realized that. Someone should have pointed out this to him, but that's, I think if they pointed that out to him, that's the argument I'm making, and that argument is not popular. The argument that you cannot escape what you are.
So you don't think someone can escape, as in if someone's brought up a Muslim, you don't think they can change?
I think
if they leave Islam?
I think certainly some can, but I think it's very difficult. And I think
difficult because of the pressures from family, or difficult because you don't think that it's possible for someone to change?
I think certainly the pressure from family is the reason that most don't. Also because in the
it's punishable by death.
By death. So obviously, I think that's the most important reason. But if we look at the people who stand against that, that's what he did. He didn't leave Islam, I guess, though de facto he did, but
he didn't publicly say
it. But
I'm an apostate.
But I mean, it's very difficult to change the person you've been created to be. Once you're an adult, I mean, you can certainly change a bit, but to change a lot, that's difficult. And so, you know, that's why I'm taking the example with you and me.
But that could be on the counter side. There's so many people who are brought up as non-Muslims who then totally change. They're all converting.
Yeah,
and then they change totally.
I agree, but that's the other way. And I think it's a lot easier to change from freedom to a system you choose than to break free of your chains. So but I mean, it's an interesting discussion. But I would argue that based on the empirical data we have, it doesn't seem like that a lot of Muslims in Denmark have decided that the Danish way is better.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I had this discussion with Quilliam. Do you remember Quilliam? They were a counter-extremism think tank, a Muslim one in the UK. And I remember sitting with the Imam, who the Imam would talk about his views and his Reformation views and all his moderate views. And I said, this is great that they're your views. But how many people have converted to your way of thinking within the Islamic prison system? Because you know how many have converted to Salafism, Wahhabism? Do you know how many they're changing the minds of? You're changing no one. No one's coming to your way of thinking.
This is what the argument you're making is an argument I'm making when I have a debate with a Ahmadiyya Muslim. Because
no one's listening to you. How many
nobody listens to you. I mean, the real Muslims don't accept that you're a Muslim at all.
Yeah, you get killed more than me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they have been. They're targeted. And in your work as a lawyer, I saw some of who was the most high-profile. Did you represent Lars Andersen?
I represent Lars Andersen. I don't anymore, I have to say. But
Can you tell me who he is?
Lars Andersen is a former police officer in Denmark who was first brought to attention because he said he would no longer intervene if he found someone with a small amount of cannabis for his own use.
He wanted to legalize cannabis.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then eventually he left the police force, and then he started being a freedom activist. So basically he's some kind of a anarcho-capitalist, extreme libertarian. I'm also a libertarian, but we are in different points of the spectrum, I guess.
Okay.
But he's a gentleman of the opposition, certainly, and he made some important points about how the government is controlling us. So that's one of my clients, and of course, John Salveson is another famous client because he was actually the reason the blasphemy law was repealed, because this was a guy who actually burned a Quran in his garden, and then he was charged with this. And then before we went to trial,
what year was this?
This was 2017.
Okay.
And this was 1 year after I saw your speech at the For Freedom March in January 2016 in Copenhagen, because you were here as well then.
Yeah.
And so the government decided, the parliament decided to repeal the blasphemy law in 2017, and that was a result of the fact that now this trial was going forward, and everybody except the Social Democrats in Parliament thought this was ridiculous, and so they repealed the law before it went to trial. And now, well, we'll get to that, but it's gloomy.
Well, they're trying to reintroduce a blasphemy law now to make it illegal to burn religious books. By religious books,
they're introducing a law that will make it a lot worse than it was before the blasphemy law was repealed, because the blasphemy law didn't really do much, because there had been an example where on national TV, like the BBC of Denmark, a journalist burned a Bible live, and he wasn't charged. So
that probably celebrated.
So that was the state of affairs when there was still a blasphemy law. With the new law, that would certainly be illegal and punishable with 2 years imprisonment. And it's not just burning. You can't tear pages out. You can't stick it with a knife. You can't soil it. I mean, it's just a great setback for democracy and freedom of speech. And as one of the great debaters, Christian Marcuson, wrote just yesterday, this is not something that can be changed back, because once you allow this, no government will risk the catastrophe of the security situation if they want to repeal it again.
And let's look at why they are possibly going to allow this. It's not because of the argument of free speech. It's because they're fearful. That's what I've seen now. They're saying it's a threat of national security. There's a national security threat in Denmark because people are exercising their right to criticise or burn the Quran.
On that point alone, they're being honest. Right on that point
they're
alone,
they're admitting we don't.
They're admitting we're scared of the big guy in the schoolyard. He wants our lunch money, and we'll give it to him because then we think he'll leave us alone.
But we saw with Charlie Hebdo, because when the Charlie Hebdo attack happened, all of our leaders all marched through Paris holding arms, and we all stand for freedom, we all stand for free speech. But then in question, do they?
No, well, obviously not. And the thing is, they're also leaving our two fellow Scandinavian countries under the bus because it's legal in Sweden and in Norway. So they're really being.
So you could cross the bridge to Malmo, and and you can burn the Quran.
Yeah.
But Denmark are making, and it's strange. It seems the government of Denmark, even the taxi driver on the way here. As I said, I forgot my Quran, so I said I need to try and get a Quran. So I got a taxi, and I said take me to a big mosque. Went to a big mosque, and he said, "There's no call to prayer." That's right. There's no call to prayer, and I said, "Is that a good thing?" He said, "Yes, it's a good thing because people who live in these houses." So that was outlawed, right? The call to prayer from minarets was outlawed in 2008, off the top of my head.
Well, I don't think it's ever been in law, really. I mean, it's been illegal. I think you have to have a permission for that. But
what was the gentleman's name? I can remember him, who fought that campaign to have the minarets banned.
Certainly, the thing is that this is not going to end with the Quran burning ban. It's just a beginning. So it's a slippery slope, and they want more. And the organization of Islamic countries, they're not, they're just like, this works. Threats are working in Denmark.
They've been threatening NATO. Have they been threatening to do NATO? Have Turkey been threatening?
I mean, it's not like this is a Swedish problem because Sweden is not yet a member of NATO. So
and Turkey's been putting pressure on Sweden. Turkey's been putting pressure on Europe.
But Sweden is just like this is like the upside down world because Sweden, as you might know, is a lot worse off than Denmark with the Muslim immigration.
Yep.
But they're actually saying, well, we have freedom of speech here, so we can't really change that. It's in the Constitution. And then Denmark, which was supposed to be like leading the way, be the vanguard of freedom, they're saying, oh, well, we're scared, so now we are punishing our own citizens because terrorists are threatening us.
Who's in Sweden in power? Is the Swedish the political party in power?
Well, I mean, the political parties in power are the right-wing parties, but the most right-wing party in parliament, which is the Sweden Democrats, they're not actually in government.
Okay.
But there is support of the government.
Holds it together.
I would say
Do you think that's why?
I certainly think that's one reason, but I also think that in general, I mean, certainly several of the parties in the government in Sweden, they could never argue that you should limit freedom of speech like that, because that would go against their basic political opinions. So
I think they'd argue in the UK. I think that would be successful in the UK, and I think all the political parties would be saying you can't, but you should.
Well, I mean, they've certainly banned me from the country. So from the UK, because I proclaimed in March that I want to go to Wakefield and burn a Quran there.
Oh man, yeah, over the school where they got the boy up. So okay, I remember.
So I reacted and said, now I'm going to Wakefield to burn a Quran to show them that this is legal in the UK. You can criticize Islam in the UK.
Let's explain what happened there. There was a young boy. He was at school, and he's autistic, so he has difficulties. Yeah, and am I right that he muddied it, just tore marked the Quran, and then they had basically a Sharia tribunal in a mosque
with the police.
The police sitting there nodding their heads while the imam said how terrible it was, while the mum begged the community for forgiveness for her 14-year-old autistic son
and called him a silly boy.
Yeah, and they basically
she had to demean her own boy in public
because she was fearful he'd be killed.
Yeah.
So the same reasons of why governments are looking now to suppress free speech. Okay, and in response to that, you said you was going to come to Wakefield and burn a Quran.
Yes.
And what happened?
And then happened the Minister of State Security in Britain. He was asked in Parliament, and he said, "Well, we put Mr. Paludan on the list of people that are not allowed to enter the country."
So you're not allowed to enter the country. There was an imam talking at Green Lane Mosque just weeks ago, an imam talking at Green Lane Mosque in Birmingham. This is the problem we have, is we have imams coming in from all over the world who are promoting hatred, who are talking. The actual imam I'm talking about, that mosque was given £2.2 million by the British government in a grant. The man who's in charge of educating the children is there telling people how to cover a woman while stoning her. Yeah? How to dig the hole. He's given the explanation in the mosque, and he's in charge of the education for the youth of this massive 3,500 people congregation in the city of Birmingham. And imams and hate preachers are allowed in, week out. They fly back and forward from Pakistan, from Iraq, from Afghanistan to promote hatred in mosques across our country. This is the real free speech issue, which I wanted to find out here in Denmark whilst I was here, is the people who are calling for, I'm going to find out hopefully over this weekend if the Danish people you meet in the street, A, do you believe in free speech? I think I believe they'll say yes. B, should you be able to burn the Quran? And then I want to find out what they say, because I think just a taxi driver on the way here said, oh no, it's causing us big problems.
I think you should ask a second question before the third question,
Yep.
because do you believe in free speech? Yes. Do you believe that terrorists should dictate restrictions on free speech, and then they will say no, and then you'll say it should be legal to burn the Quran, because then they'll contradict themselves.
Totally, yeah. And not just contradict themselves, but what's within the Quran? What is it for yourself? What is it that you feel the need to burn it?
Well, I mean, there are actually two questions here. So the first one I'll address just in a few seconds. The second one is, because the first one is, why is Islam such a terrible ideology and religion? And that's what you're asking.
Yep.
The second one is, okay, setting aside that it's a terrible idea, does it work well where it's practiced? I mean, does it make happy lives? And of course, the answer to that is no, because everybody who lived there
wants to come here.
Yeah, they want to come here. So, I mean, obviously not. But the first question is, the Quran, and certainly the Hadith more even, have these terrible statements about what to do to non-believers, and terrible statements about what to do to people who do not subscribe to the rules set down by the Muslim God who does not exist. And, you know, shouldn't it be and it says that you have to kill me because I'm not a Muslim. It says that in the Quran. You have to cut my throat because I'm not a Muslim. Do you think the average person? This is what I don't. I obviously am very versed on the verses in the Quran about death, about murder, even about paedophilia or prepubescent marriage. There's a verse in the Quran that explains how to divorce a prepubescent child. Like, so you've married her and then you're getting divorced, and then there's all the verses of hate. Do you think the average person that I approach in the street of Denmark will have any idea of what's actually in that book? Absolutely not. And I also think that when you tell them, they will think you're lying.
Yeah, I agree.
Because
what I hope to do is
show them.
Which I'll get Quran out tomorrow.
I can tell you where to get Quran, so there's no problem with that.
Okay.
But I mean, it's just so absurd to think that we're walking around people in the street that actually subscribe to these things. So the most Danes would reject it as hate speech. They're saying you're committing hate speech because you're lying about what Islam is.
Whereas the actual hate speech is...
It doesn't say...
Hate speech
doesn't say that, okay? So... I mean, to make a statement about I don't subscribe to books that say I should be killed, I think that's completely reasonable. And it's kind of a literary self-defense to burn the book that has instructions for me to be killed. But of course, there's also a second point. There are many points, but the second valuable point is Islam is branded as the religion of peace. And therefore, when you burn the Quran, the members of Islam, the people who support Islam, they should react with peace because it's the religion of peace.
Do you know that term that term Islam as religion of peace is nowhere if you research it until George W. Bush. Until George Bush after September 11th, he started that lie, which has now been pumped, and now it's just they say it as a matter of fact, Islam's religion of peace. Yeah. But no one in history has ever said that. Right. No one who understands Islam, no previous world leaders, no politicians has ever said Islam's religion of peace. No Muslims say it.
I think we have far too many peacemakers in Denmark right now, so I'd rather send them all back to the peaceful countries they're from. But I mean, the problem is, I've shown for years now. And it's not like, I mean, I prefer this. I prefer civilized debate. I prefer interviews. I prefer a conversation. If I do that, I get no attention in the media. So the people will never know what I say. So I had to choose something that would also give some kind of attention. And so what I did was, at first, in 2018, I just went out to some of the ethnic neighborhoods and I stood up and I said, I actually think Islam is a very stupid idea. And I think actually this is a very gay neighborhood because I think Muhammad liked homosexual sex acts, and maybe, I don't know, a lot of guys here like that too. And that pissed them off so much that I didn't have to do anything with the Quran. I didn't even have to bring a Quran. I could just say that and they all burned cars.
Is that what happened?
That's what happened.
So from you standing up and saying that, they rioted and...
They rioted. Okay, so that's completely like, okay, do we have a problem here or not? The self, the ability to control your emotions is very central in Western Europe. Not so much in other places, I gather. And if you import a lot of people from places where totally ravaged aggression is very normal, then you have problem. And then I started in 2019 and upped the ante a bit and said, okay, well, we've done that. Maybe we should have a look at the book and see what happens. And of course, if all the peacemakers are as peaceful as they claim, nothing will happen. But that's not quite what happened. So what happened was, we did protests 3 times a week for a few months in spring of 19, and then everything...
3 times a week?
3 times a week.
When you say a protest, you mean you set fire to a Quran?
We didn't really do that every time, but certainly the thing is, at that time I was so much in the media and so well known that they were angry before I arrived. So I didn't really have to do much.
Thousands were out. So explain to me, so you're arriving in an area of where, Copenhagen?
That was the 14th of April we're talking about now.
Tell me about that day.
Well, I would rather begin the day before, because the day before was in Viborg, which is a medium-sized town in Jutland, and I went there and went to the special neighborhood, and we burned a Quran. And the thing is, I didn't really personally burn a Quran at that time. It was always other people. I have done afterwards, though. But we burned a Quran, and a migrant from Syria, he breached the police line, and then he hit me in the back of the neck with a stone, like this size. So he could have killed me. And as a reaction of that, I was pretty pissed with the police, and I made some statements that afterwards have been labeled as very hateful towards the police. I'm like, okay, well...
What statements? What did you say?
Basically, I said that it can't really be incompetence. If you're that incompetent, it's just like not believable. So maybe you're willfully not protecting me from having a stone in my back.
Doesn't seem that controversial.
No,
so
I don't
basically
think
they've
so.
let someone run through and hit you with a rock, and you've said you've let someone through and rock with a rock.
Basically, that's what happened. But it's just the media; they can turn everything into some kind of absurd story when it's not really what happened. But I was pretty tired when I came back to Copenhagen on the evening of that Saturday, and I knew that I had a protest on Sunday. Now, I had avoided Copenhagen during most of this because whenever I did protest in Copenhagen, I was always attacked by Antifa. It's not like I'm afraid of Antifa, but they're blurring the message.
They're irrelevant in the argument.
They're irrelevant in the argument against Islamization. So that's why I wanted to avoid Copenhagen, and there was plenty to do elsewhere. But I had received an email a few months prior from an old lady who had her grandson write the email when she dictated it, and she said, I live in Mjolnir Park, which was a wonderful neighborhood when I moved in 20 years ago, and now it's complete shit, and I'm so proud of what you're doing. Please, before I die, would you come to my neighborhood and burn the Quran here as well? And I was moved by this email, so I said, okay, well, you know what? I'll make an exception. So I wrote her, I'm very moved by what you're writing. I'll put it in the calendar and I'll do one in your neighborhood in Copenhagen. Just because you asked me to, I'll come. And what happened was, on the night between Saturday and Sunday, a bomb exploded in a car in that neighborhood. And I was called by the Danish security...
Because they knew you was going to do it?
Yes.
So they set a bomb off?
Yes. And there was also rumors around that another bomb would blow, so they should normal people should keep away from my protest. And I was called by the Danish Security Intelligence Service on the forenoon of Sunday and told, Copenhagen police will call you shortly and they will tell you that it's a no-go for that neighborhood, and you will have to deal with them as to where else you can go. And so they called me, the Copenhagen police, and said, security, we cannot do it there, but you can suggest other places. And I gave them 5 locations, and they called back and said, 2 of those are not acceptable, the other 3 are fine, pick one. So I picked one, called Blue Yard Square, Blågårdsplads in Nørrebro. And I went there with the vice president of the party, and when I say vice president of the party, we were like no one. I mean, we were very few people.
Party as in you'd set up a political party?
I'd set up
what
a hardline, Stram Kurs.
Which stands for?
Hardline, basically.
Okay.
I mean, a hardline on migration, that's what it means. I mean, some people have a soft line against migration, and some people have a hard line against migration, and I have the hard line. So we went there, we met up with some of the blue police, and we walked there like, I was like, oh, Ronnie, that's my friend, I'm just really not in the mood. I was hit with a stone yesterday, and now we have to do this protest, and we can't even do it where we're supposed to do it. And
you weren't feeling it?
You know, this is really, but we'll do it, okay. So we went there, and I was very wrong, because I thought it was going to be a dull day, and why was I wrong? And the police, they also lacked some intelligence that day, I can tell you that.
There weren't enough of them.
It took like not even 5 minutes. I think we threw the Quran to each other twice. We didn't burn any Quran. We threw it to each other twice, and then a police officer was yelling, "Now they're coming!" And then 2 Somalis, they ran in and tried to attack me and steal the Quran. And then from there on, everything went to shit. You know, they were burning cars and throwing stones and whatnot at the police. And well, that was when the news broke, because the media could no longer hide me. I mean, they tried to not tell about me, but now when the entire borough was burning, they couldn't really.
And this was in Copenhagen.
This was in Copenhagen. They couldn't really say, "Oh, we don't know what's happening there." So,
how many Muslims were rioting? Would you say hundreds?
Hundreds, I would say. And it was a very strange day, and I don't really have to go into detail, but I can tell you that the police were very much not in their usual self, because this had completely surprised them. So they did not have the resources, and they didn't know what to do, because I was saying, well, I want to do another protest somewhere else. And like, well, you can't do that. And then eventually they gave me an administrative decision that you're not allowed to protest anywhere in the Copenhagen police area at all. And then I said, okay, well, then the neighbor police, I can protest there. And then they told me in the neighbor police district, no, you're also forbidden here. So
is that legal?
That's a good question. I mean, the police in Denmark do a lot of things where you can really question the legality.
Do you think that, so what you're doing is to prove the peacefulness of the community, you're going and doing something to wave it in front of them,
which is completely legal and a political statement. And the political statement is, 1, I dislike what the Quran and Islam says. 2, please prove that you are very peaceful people, because everybody knows Islam is the religion of peace, so prove it. And you know, the evidence is like lacking a bit. And of course, afterwards, it's been like a whole history of people failing to prove the peacefulness.
Can I ask, so as you're doing this, because I think back to where I am now. I'm now 40. When I started my activism with the English Defence League, we were full steam ahead, and I didn't really care about much. But the effect, because this must have had a massive effect on you. What about your family? Have you got a family?
Well, I mean,
have you got a mother and father?
I think for security reasons, it's better that I don't speak so much about family.
Okay.
Certainly, my 2 siblings have already made statements years ago
against you,
against me,
through fear.
Certainly, that's a theory. But I wouldn't. I mean, I have no comments on my sister, and as far as my brother is concerned. He certainly screwed me in the elections of 19, that's for sure, because he did a propaganda video from a Muslim propaganda firm to dissuade people from voting for me. So
your brother did?
I don't know.
Was that your brother?
That was my brother.
Your brother done a video dissuading people.
Yeah. So certainly that's and I mean the more I speculate for his reasons, the more attention he will get. And when I think one of the reasons is he wants attention, certainly that would be counterproductive. But I think certainly it isn't out of the realm of possibility that security is one reason. Because
he wanted to distance himself as much as he could from you, because people are questioning that he's your brother or family members.
I mean, certainly if you're a terrorist, it makes little sense to kill him when he's already said that he's against me. Okay, so for that reason, I that could be one reason. And as far as my parents are concerned, I'm not really going to comment other than to say that you asked earlier whether I had Swedish ancestry as well, and my father is from Sweden, and though part of Sweden that used to be Danish, but still from Sweden. So that's as far as the ancestry goes. But
prior to your activism or prior to your talking about Islam, did you have a normal family relationship with brothers and sisters and mum and dad?
I think normal is such a strange word, really, when that concerned. I don't think it's not like we hit each other. I mean, we had the usual relationship. I didn't really, at that time, I did a road trip with my brother in 2014 in America, so I guess at that time it was reasonably normal. It's not like I'm very saddened by, you know, the fact that it has consequences, that I'm against Islam and outspoken. If it's the case that my brother and sister are so afraid for their own lives that they don't want to talk with me for that reason, that's sad. Okay, but I can't really do anything about that. And
when you say it has consequences. Like, it has they're massive consequences. For the rest of your life, forever now. You're always going to be the man who burns the Quran.
Well, I hopefully will be known for more than just that. But the thing is, I know what Denmark will be like if it has more Islam. I know this.
And what will it be like? What will the future look like?
We will be slaves, and we will have to obey Islam, and that is not
convert or pay the jizya.
That is not pleasant. Okay, and both of those choices are not freedom. Either of those choices is not free. Okay?
That's a very
but it's not just that. I mean, I've been hardened by all the attacks on me, and that's why I rarely show emotion, because that's a sign of weakness that will just encourage the terrorists to do more and just encourage more attacks on me. So I rarely show emotion, but what I will never deny is that when I hear about Danish teenagers, like Danish female girls being raped, or Danish male teenagers being robbed and forced to take off their clothes and demeaned and humiliated, and forced to state on camera that their mother is a hooker and so forth.
These are some high-profile videos you're talking about that there's been on, and circumstances
but those high-profile videos are just a drop in the ocean
to what's happening.
I will never deny that I'm deeply moved emotionally by this, because it is so patently unfair that you're born in a country with one of the greatest opportunities for you in the world, and you have to suffer being demeaned and humiliated and maybe even raped or murdered because somebody else from elsewhere have the opportunity to do this for really no reason. And so I'm very, very saddened by the reality of what's happening with the Danish youth. And the restrictions on my life is really just nothing compared to the sufferings of many Danish teenagers. And when I meet them, and maybe 10 years from now, when it's really worse, and somebody asks me, you know, I've just been raped, why didn't you do something when you had the chance? I can look them straight in the eye and say, you know what, I did everything. I did everything I could to stop this. So my conscience is completely clean. And so this is for me not even it's not even a debate. I mean, the restrictions on my life is nothing compared to what's happening to Danish youth, and I want to be able to be absolutely clean, and spotless, and I have done everything I could, and then that's what I'm doing.
Are you willing to give your life, sacrifice your life? In a sense, you already have.
Well, I mean, I would prefer not to, but there was one of the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists who said, I would actually rather die standing than live on my knees. And certainly it's not just a matter of that, it's also a matter of being an example for people, because we have, unfortunately, the forced situation that I have to teach Danish young men that when they've been taught that they should react to violence with the other chin, the other cheek, that's not the case any longer. Now they have to actually fight back with more violence, and that goes against everything they've been taught. But I think it seems like that's the only way, really. So it's not that I have any plans on being killed for this. I want to die as the imp in Game of Thrones when he's asked, "How do you want to die, little man?" That's my preference, but we don't have to get into what that actually is. People can watch the series if they want to. But let's say he wants to die peacefully and in old age.
Do you feel isolated on your own? Do you, in this struggle? Because there was times. I'm just asking for there was times when I led the English Defence League where I might have had an army on the streets. But at times when the shit hit the fan, when I was up against it, when people were looking for you, when people were targeting you, when you're getting attacked, or when you were in jail, I felt alone. So
well, I think that's it's very cold at the top, right? So there's no question that the kind of well, I guess valor is a big word. Let's find a smaller word than that. The kind of courage that's necessary to do this fight is not something that is easy to attract a lot of support for always.
Because they get to see what happens to you as well. They set an example by you.
I mean,
how many people are going to want to live under police protection?
And it would be even worse if I were actually killed. That would be even worse, okay? So
you mean because it sends a message to everyone, look what we did to him, which is essentially what they're trying to do.
That's what terrorists do.
Yeah,
that's why they did Charlie Hebdo, because,
Shut up. Everyone shut up.
Yeah. So, but of course, I mean, being in secluded locations and being kept away from my social circle is not very beneficial for having a lot of social relationships, and that's a problem. But that's, I mean, you're asking like very personal, emotional questions that I can completely understand why you're asking, because they're relevant. But if I go into too much detail, that's really just giving the terrorists what they want.
Okay.
So no doubt it has consequences, but it's not consequences I can't handle. And it's not a secret that after a Muslim tried to kill me with a knife on the 5th of June 2020.
Tell me about that.
I was doing a protest in Aarhus, which is the second largest
Aarhus, that's where I come, wasn't it? Do you remember? When we had the English Defence League, we met up to set up the Danish Defence League. We come to Aarhus. They burned everything.
Yeah.
5,000 Somalians. We were standing up on the stairs.
It's really a wasteland now, but certainly the west of Aarhus is just a one big conglomerate of ethnic neighborhoods.
Do you know, we went there, and what was it? Aarhus is on fire, because the place was burning. But there was about 30 of us went from England, the English Defence League, met 300 lads, Danish lads, and I remember we got put on these stairs. There's stairs in the town centre. And we can see, I'm looking, thinking, it was the biggest policing operation Denmark's ever had. Probably not now, but it was.
Yeah.
Probably one of yours is maybe now, but it was the biggest policing operation Denmark's ever had. And as we got up on the stairs, I was looking, thinking, no, they don't know what they're doing, the police. No, in England, our police are on it. They're very good at locking areas down, at curtailing it and getting everyone locked in. But I thought, they're definitely going to break through it, yeah? There's 100% they're breaking through. So I said to our lads from England, I said, right, if they break through, smash these doors, we'll smash the doors in and we'll hold this this doorway, because then they can't get round us. We hold the doorway. So we're all standing there, and as they come from running through the lines from everywhere, we all start smashing these doors to hold the line. And as we're doing that, the Danish lads run straight at them, and I've never felt like such a bunch of wankers and letdowns, because as we're bashing the doors so we can stand and hold ourselves, the Danish men have run out and fighting them on the green. And I felt like we absolutely let ourselves down. It was humiliating, because I thought we was trying to work. I thought there's 5,000 of them, there's 300 of us. We need to hold the doors. But the Danish lads run straight into him. They're as game as any men I've met. And it was, I think then it was a lad called Casper, who I think went on to join a motorbike gang. But that was the group of lads we met, and that was in Aarhus. And I'd never heard of Aarhus, but there was Somalians everywhere. They were smashing the coach as we were trying to get in. And it surprised me with Denmark. That, as a city, surprised me.
Aarhus police have just basically decided that whenever I want to hold a protest in areas where Islam is, I'm denied.
You can't.
Yeah.
Because they can't handle it. Because they couldn't handle it then.
No.
And that was 2012.
And they're extremely weak. I mean, they have no control over that city at all. But they're trying to propagate the idea that they do have some kind of authority. But basically, this was the closest I came to the most renowned ghetto in Copenhagen, Gellerup Park in Aarhus. And that was on the other side of the road. That was as far as I could get. I was allowed a small piece of green grass called the Park of the Poets. And I was allowed to have my protest there. And when I arrived, I mean, things had been boiling for a few days already, because I'm not going to announce that I'll be there. So I'm not
They know you come in, they're building up.
Mock people for days before, this is going to be a lot of fun. So I went there and a Lebanese in a white suit was there, and my guys weren't there yet because they were doing their own thing elsewhere, which was kind of an ingenious plan, but didn't really work out like that. So I was arriving alone. He was there, and I said, okay, well, you want to have a debate? And then he said, you are idiot. I say, okay, well, that's a difficult starting point for debate, but certainly we can try. And then he took out a knife like this and went against me to kill me, and then he was shot.
He was shot?
By the police.
Because the police were with you?
Yeah.
So if they weren't with you, you'd be dead?
Oh, absolutely.
This was what, 2020?
Yeah, and so basically, it's not a secret that I had post-traumatic stress after that, because who wouldn't, I guess.
Have you accepted that reality? I struggled in my early years. Have you accepted that reality that at some point one of them may be successful? You essentially could be walking around with terminal illness.
I haven't really. Sorry?
You could compare it to walking around with a terminal illness at some point.
No, I haven't accepted that fact, because I don't think that's. I mean, as I said in the beginning, everybody can be killed for any reason, I guess. I mean, you can walk across the street and be hit by a car and then you're dead. So I don't think it's conductive for my operation to
worry about it.
No, I don't think so. And I think that's what the terrorists want, and that's what's working, because people are scared to death. And so to lead by example means that if there's one thing I'm not going to be is scared, okay? So because...
that's admirable.
It's certainly necessary, because the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. I know that's not true, because the terrorists do kill people, but you certainly should, not be afraid just to be afraid. And that's a big part of the power of certain foreigners in Denmark, is that people are afraid of them. So if you take that away, there's a lot less. And there is an example.
Is there a resistance in the youth in Denmark, for the Danish youth? Are they changing? Are they rebelling?
Danish youth are very scared of the people who are anti-Danish. Let's call them the non-democratic elements. And the reason I'm speaking in codes is, we get slapped with hate speech here.
And you was convicted. You was convicted.
So I can't really say that it's the followers of any specific religion, but
you can't say that.
I can't say that because then I would be demeaning a special group.
So if you said, because you got convicted of saying, can you finish for me? You was convicted of a hate crime, was you?
I have been convicted like 6 different hate crimes, and the problem is you can get convicted even if what you're saying is true. because I was referencing the statistics for crime. I mean,
This was to do with rape. You were saying that Muslims are more.
I'll
say it. Muslims are more likely to be raping.
And even if I'm just referencing the facts from the statistics, I can be convicted, because if it's a demeaning fact, then you can be convicted. So I was referencing, in another case, I was referencing IQ levels in Africa. I was convicted, even though I was just stating the obvious truth about IQ levels. So, and that's the same if you're quoting rape statistics. That's the same way. So,
well, what are the IQ statistics? Is this like, because Somalia is an average IQ of 69? Is that right?
Isn't it 62? It's the problem is
62, and in the UK that's regarded as retarded, no?
Yeah,
I believe.
And that's the average. And so just as many people less than more. And you know,
So how to, yeah.
I'm not going to say anything.
What do you say to people
I'm
who
gonna, sorry.
What do you say to people who say, because I've heard the IQ argument is based on white supremacy?
There is no doubt that IQ is not solely based on nurture, it's also based on nature. So there can be differences of opinion as to what percentage is genes and what percentage is upbringing and education. There can be differences of opinion. Helmut Nyborg, which was once a candidate for our party in 2019, and he was a professor emeritus of psychology and one of the leading IQ research experts in the world. His opinion is that nature, i.e. genes, is 80%, and the other is 20%. But the fact of the matter is...
what does that mean? Does that mean
what
he's saying is that 80%
that basically means that if you're very stupid, then no amount of education can make you very bright. That's basically what it means. It means that most... You can certainly better yourself, but not that much. Most of it is given in genes.
And he's saying that's based on whether you're white or not white.
No, he's not going that far, but he's certainly saying that based on what country you're from, that has a lot to do with it. And basically, I mean, it's not... let's look at Nigeria. You know that some of the best runners in the world are from Nigeria. They really know how to run. I don't know about you, you can speak for yourself, but I personally don't feel demeaned if somebody tells me that in average, Nigerians are better runners than Danish people. I don't feel demeaned by that. I'm just like, okay, well, probably their genes make them better runners. You have to run a lot in Africa because otherwise you get eaten by a lion maybe, okay? So I don't feel demeaned by that, but when we have an obvious fact that nobody's disputing, that some people from Nigeria and average people from Nigeria are better runners, they're faster. Is it unreasonable to think that when some countries have genes that make them faster, then some countries have genes that make them smarter? You know?
Am I right that Jews sit at the top of the IQ?
Ashkenazi Jews are. Ashkenazi Jews are, you know, and you can...
So if someone made that fact, I'm not offended by it.
I'm not offended either. I'm just like, more power to you. Maybe that explains why Jews are so vastly disproportionately represented in Nobel Prizes. And I'm not talking about peace, because everybody can get peace. I'm not talking about literature.
For inventions, for everything.
I'm talking about science, hardcore science. Jews are represented madly more than anybody else, and much more than they should be based on, you know, their numbers in the world.
And you put that down to their IQ?
Absolutely. And I'm not offended by that in the least, you know.
So if you're making a fact, say let's just take Somalia for example, as an example, when you make that fact, would your argument be that it's got nothing to do with racism, it's a fact?
If I answer that question...
Because where is the fact come? Because say like, for example, I've been educated and gone to school with lots of black lads who are very smart.
Yeah.
And they're Caribbean history, Ghana.
Yeah.
Nigeria.
Yeah.
My friend Priye, who's Nigerian, very intelligent.
This is important because nobody is making... Well,
in fact, I say he's got a higher IQ than most.
Yeah. That's I can't say that nobody's making the argument, but I'm certainly not making the argument that there aren't black people or yellow people or red people that are extremely bright and are much brighter than I am. Yeah. Because obviously there are, okay? So that's not the issue here, because we're talking about population groups.
Okay.
So you can have 10 black friends that are a lot smarter than you and a lot smarter than me.
Yep.
That doesn't really prove anything. Okay, well, it proves that they're very smart, but that's what it proves. And we're not really. I'm talking about politics here, and I'm talking about accepting certain facts that might be uncomfortable. And anecdotal evidence is very interesting, but it's just anecdotal evidence. So, for instance, the fact that when I went to Doncaster in 2015, because I was at a UKIP event there, the fact that I was given a ride from the local Asda to my hotel by 2 black people who were very nice, that doesn't really prove anything other than just that there are 2 black people in Doncaster who were so hospitable that they gave me a ride to my hotel, okay? Nor would the fact that I was attacked or almost, maimed by a Muslim Arab prove more than that. But if the statistics say that people of Syrian descent in Denmark statistically commit much more and are convicted of much more violent crime than Danes are, that's not anecdotal evidence. Then that's a fact, okay?
Okay.
And that's relevant. So I don't have any racial prejudice, but I do think we should accept some facts. And one fact is, on average, Nigerians are better runners.
Great at fraud and all.
What?
Great at fraud and all.
I have no comment on that, but I mean, the thing is, I think it's a very important thing that we're raising here, because even though
this is a difficult conversation for many people to even have,
it is, and I think we're trying to have the conversation as softly as you can, and it's important because I just said in the beginning that people in the world are different, and we focused on the fact that their religion is different, okay? And Muslims have Islam and other people have other religions, and of course that has importance on how they're behaving.
Well, I'd say like if you look at Pakistanis in Bradford in the UK, 76% of them marry their first cousins.
Yeah.
Generation after generation. A few generations of doing that, you're not going to have a high EQ.
Yeah, and I couldn't argue against that. And the fact is, you should be able to talk freely about not just the differences of different religions and the behaviors and the cultures and the way they're doing stuff, but also, is there a biological difference between different people in the world? And the fact of the matter is, we can see that there is, because the pigmentation of certain people is different than other people. So of course there's a biological difference. And that doesn't mean that you're racist for pointing that out. I'm not racist when I'm saying Africans in general are a lot darker skinned than I am. That's not racism, that's a fact, okay? And maybe we should accept that we're not saying that people are bad people because they're different than me, for instance. But we have to accept there are differences.
Well, I've seen accusations against yourself. I've had them. Are you an ethno-nationalist? Do you believe that Denmark should be for white people?
I believe that Denmark, in the majority, in the vast majority, should be for Danes or people who are like Danes. But that, labeling that as a white people is wrong, because first of all, I would say that Swedes and Norwegians and Danes and Icelanders and people from the Faroe Islands are more or less the same. So that would be more or less the same ethnic group, okay? Mm-hmm. And the reason I can say that is that if we took in, and now I'm talking about the ethnic original populations, of course. If we took in 500,000 from Norway and 500,000 from Denmark, it would still work, from Sweden. If we took in 500,000 from each of the other Scandinavian countries, our country would not go to hell. It will still work, because we're that closely related, okay? If we took in 500,000 from Somalia...
Wow. You haven't, yeah?
We haven't yet, okay?
No, I'm trying.
And so
like you have in our house.
If ethno-nationalist means that I basically believe that it's paramount that we... maintain our ethnic, our ethnicity in Denmark, then yes. But that's not the same as being a supremacist. Those are two different things. I basically think that England and Britain was a lot better off when British people were living there. And when I say British people, I mean people who are actually British.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess that's an ethno-nationalist point of view, but I don't think it's a supremacist point of view, because that would be saying that we are better because we are ethnically British. But that's not what I said. I said I think they would be better off because with all the problems that Denmark and Britain and other countries have, it's still not wise to add disharmony as another problem. So I think that's... I think ethno-nationalist has a bad flavor, even though in reality it just means the basic thing that you think your own country is for your own people. And do you know where everybody is ethno-nationalist? Iraq, Iran, Syria.
Yeah.
All the Muslim countries are completely ethno-nationalist, okay?
Korea.
I think if you look at the world, the vast majority of people in the world are ethno-nationalists because they think their country is for their own people, okay? And I think the problem is that...
Why is it? Because Ireland for the Irish, it seems like there's a big slogan now, Ireland for the Irish, as Ireland is being invaded in mass numbers. That doesn't seem as under attack, that phrase, as when you say it in Great Britain or some other countries. Why is that?
I don't have an explanation, but my guess would be maybe because Ireland is, until recently,
still Irish,
very Irish.
So essentially, when I look at Viktor Orban, I look at leaders from these countries, the Czech Republic, Poland, and I look at the statements they're making about the invasion, about they don't want Islamic immigration, and I think that the majority of our politicians would probably be saying that if we hadn't been infiltrated to a high level of every government and every council.
Viktor Orban is totally ethno-nationalist, and that's not a bad person, okay?
No, he's a hero.
He's a hero, and the Poles are totally ethno-nationalist. I would guess that Salvini is probably ethno-nationalist as well.
Salvini, I've been so disheartened by the recent election and what she's done, the new lady.
Yeah.
And Salvini was ousted, basically.
Yeah, he was. But I mean, he's still there, though. He's in government, but yeah. Well, I mean, basically, Italy is Italians is the problem with Italians. But you asked me, are you ethno-nationalist? Like that? That's a stamp that can be problematic.
I guess some people would take ethno-nationalism as meaning that Britain needs to be totally white. Denmark needs to be totally white. Do you believe that someone can be Danish and not be white? Do you believe someone can be Danish and British?
Well, they certainly can't be ethnically Dane, because if you're ethnically Dane, you are like light skinned. That's impossible to run away from. But if you can certainly be a Dane without being white. If you're from Sri Lanka and you were adopted when you're 3 months old by Danish parents, then you're certainly Dane, but you're not ethnically Dane, okay? And that doesn't mean that you're labeled as a second-rate citizen. No. That just means that, we have to be honest here. The Danes are an ethnic group with a very long history, and we happen to have light skin, okay? And we also happen to have a lot of values that are common for us. And those values are compatible with Germans and with British and with a lot of European people. They are not compatible with Somalia or Iraq. They're really not, okay? And the Danes, for the most part, seem unable to understand this. And this is a problem. And do I personally think that the culture and religion of Somalia and Iraq are very stupid? Yes, I do. But that's really, I have no problem with that as long as it's there. I guess I feel sorry for the people living there, but that's more an academic statement.
But it's not there now. It's here.
It's here, and that's the problem, because I don't want to decide what other people do in their own homes, but I do want to decide what I do in my home. And since Denmark is my home, and therefore the home of the Danish people should decide that here the rules are what we say.
Do you think there's any Muslims living under 24-hour police guard? Do you think there's any Muslims that are treated the way you're being treated? Do you think there'd be a massive uprising if there were Muslims having to live currently in fear in Denmark of being killed and murdered for expressing their views on Islam? Yeah. What do you think the media would be saying? What do you think the government would be saying?
I mean, all the questions you just asked are rhetorical questions, but I can answer them anyway. But I mean, I think most people in Europe, when they hear these questions, they don't need the answers because they know the answers. Of course, if somebody just came remotely close to the kind of obscenity I'm being subjected to, and that person was a Muslim, then there would be headlines...
Or non-white. Or
non-white, or
who is being treated this way because they're black.
Then, of course, there would be headlines daily in the news,
and demanding that we need to get rid of the people who,
and also demanding that the police should they should allocate whatever resources necessary to defend me, so that I could walk on the street any day or night, any way I wanted. That would be the requirement of the media if it was a non-white person or a Muslim.
Yep.
Now, because I happen to be a white male, I happen to be in the very, very small ethnic group, and I'm talking about white males here, like 7% of the world population. For reasons that have nothing to do with me, that 7% of the world population have been responsible for almost all progress of humanity, okay? That's not my fault, that's not your fault, but we happen to be in the small ethnic group that have progressed the world, okay? For that reason, I'm being punished with not being able to walk down the street, having my life destroyed because other people want to kill me. That doesn't seem fair. That seems like ethnic prejudice. That seems like because I'm a white male, I'm treated much worse than other people would be.
How does Denmark, how does Europe solve this problem? What would you do? If you're in power tomorrow, what would you do?
Everybody who's not a Danish citizen who has committed a crime will get a letter. You have 14 days to go home. And if not, the police will put you on a plane. Okay? That's very simple. Anybody who's not a Danish citizen who is receiving public benefits will get a letter. You have 14 days to go home. Otherwise, the police will put you on a plane. Okay? Anybody who subscribes to different values than democracy and is not a Danish citizen will get it, and this includes, I guess, all Muslims.
How would you distinguish who? So, because I keep looking for what is the solution for Europe, what's going to be the solution in France, what's it going to be for us? How would you conclude who subscribes to not wanting democracy? How would how would you implement?
Certainly, if you go to a mosque,
yep,
then you cannot subscribe to democracy. Those are completely incompatible. So going to a mosque would be self-evident. I have gone on elections saying I want to ban Islam from Denmark. And how can you do that? Well, certainly to publicly ban Islam, like de facto, there are two ways to go. You
ban Sharia?
Sorry?
If you ban Sharia, you ban...
That's certainly a part of it, but I mean, you can write in the Constitution Islam is not allowed, or you can say, well, it already says so in the Constitution because it says no religion is allowed if it goes against public order or public decency. Read in the Quran, read the Hadith, and ask yourself, does this go against public order or public decency? I would say yes on both counts, okay? I think the Aisha history goes against public decency a lot because the perfect man who has lived or ever will live, according to Islam, was Muhammad, who had sex with a 9-year-old, okay? That goes against public decency. Goes against public order, it says on multiple places in Quran, hunt them down and kill them if they are not submitting. That goes against public order.
Until there is no other belief.
Yeah, well, I mean, then they should rip that page out of the Quran. And they're not going to do that because, of course, that's a lie. It is their belief. But I mean, it's not really... there's a German song called "The Gedanken sind frei," which means the thoughts are free. So I'm not really going to stop anybody from thinking that they're a Muslim in Denmark. Who can stop that? But I am going to say, if I'm in government, that We don't allow this in Denmark, and the reason for that is very clear. That whenever we have a country which is non-Muslim, and Muslim enters, Islam enters, and eventually it becomes Muslim, and we don't want that. And why is that? Well, let's see. No country has ever been safer or freer or more harmonious
With Islam.
of Islam. Never happened, okay? Never happened. But what has happened is that a lot of countries that were something else are now Islam.
Lebanon, Turkey.
Entire North Africa, Afghanistan was Buddhist, Pakistan was Hindu. So we have all those examples. And I'm like, okay, well, the counter argument is this. Just because it has never happened doesn't mean that it cannot happen. Okay, well, that's a logical argument I can accept, that the fact that it never happened doesn't mean that it cannot happen, but
Let's not experiment with our country.
let's France do that, okay? Let someone else do that. And I don't want to be a guinea pig, and I've said that. I don't want Denmark to be a guinea pig. And also, you can also look at, what's the prognosis here? Does it look like in the countries in Europe that has a lot of Islam
It's working.
that it's working? It's bringing a lot of safety and harmony, you think? It's just like,
Why do you think the borders remain open? So anyone sitting looking knows how it's going. We know what direction Europe's going in. Why do you think the borders are still open? Why do you think these NGOs are still bringing them?
the analyst Steve Coughlin, who was fired from the Joint Chiefs because he made this very true analysis about the Muslim Brotherhood and their influence on world politics, he told me this when I interviewed him in 2019 in Washington, D.C., and he said, well, basically it's cultural Marxism, because they think that the whole Western world is wrong.
They need to collapse it.
It needs to collapse it. And what way to collapse it? Well, you can bring up in Islam, that will collapse it, and then you can build it up in like a communist harmony. Of course, that isn't going to work, because what kind of Muslim country has ever been built up into communist harmony afterwards? That never happened, okay? But I think that's certainly one theory that has to be given some weight. But I also think that maybe it's a bit optimistic to believe that there's one master plan. It could be a combination of many influences. And I think the cultural Marxist influence and the woke influence is certainly one, which is ridiculous, because the woke people, the first one being shot, because it may be hard to believe. I think in the eyes of some Muslims, they actually respect me more than they respect the foreign minister in Denmark, because they hate weakness more than anything.
Yeah, they actually. I get Muslims who shake my hand. I don't like you, but I respect you.
Yeah, so strength is something that Muslims respect, even from the heathen. Weakness, they don't respect that at all. And the foreign minister of Denmark is very weak. So that's, and I've been called many things, but rarely weak or boring. But I mean, that's why the whole woke political agenda is so stupid, because they don't understand.
They'll get eaten.
Sorry?
They'll get eaten first.
Absolutely. And it's like
in Lebanon. Like in Lebanon. The left who facilitated it were the first ones to go.
It's like feeding a crocodile hoping that he eats you last, basically.
Let me ask you, if Denmark brings in this law, it's being proposed now by government, I believe, a blasphemous law where you get 2 years in jail if you burn the Quran. Will you burn the Quran?
I mean, I haven't really decided. I will certainly do whatever I can to demean Islam and the law. On the other hand, I think I have to be very careful, because they want nothing more than to put me in jail, the government. And
if they put you in jail, they don't need these two men standing outside your cell. You are then a victim of the system if you were killed.
Certainly more than two, all combined. But I mean, that would be, I think many people in government would prefer me to be killed. I think that's true. And so I have to be very careful. And it's always, what's the smartest move here? I don't think the smartest move is to blatantly violate the law. Not for me. It could be for other people, but not for me. But there are so many other options. And certainly those need to be explored. But it cannot be denied, that being said, that it would be a major setback for Denmark and Western Europe and Western civilization if that law is being passed. And then you may say, okay, well, Western civilization, that's pushing it a bit. It's really not, because this is a big thing if a Western European country does that they bow to the demands of Islam and terrorists, okay?
I've seen accusations thrown at you from many on the left, many Islamic organisations as well. Have they? What sort of levels have they gone to in your life?
Well, I mean, basically, anything that could possibly be thrown at me has been thrown at me. So they already in 2018 they started calling me a child molester, and I said, well, you're mistaken, because Muhammad was a child molester. That's your prophet. I, on the other hand, has never been charged with any sex crime or any crime involving children. So that's one thing.
When they threw that at you, is this to do with allegations on Discord?
Well, no, it also there, but certainly they threw that at me several years before that happened. So what happened on Discord was basically that I was in a party call with 30 other people, and certainly we talked about sex, but the blatant lies that there were children under 15 there is not true.
Okay, because it's good to get that, because what it seems is that anyone, that's why I'd like to understand the truth, anyone, I know that they approach women about me to try and make sexual allegations. Yeah. Andrew Tate has risen up in the things. He's now got allegations. So I want to understand if the lengths have gone to, because I've seen the headlines put out by them.
I mean, certainly there were teenagers who were above the age of sexual consent, but the conversation was not, do you want to have sex with me? This was never part of the conversation, because I don't want to have sex with somebody on Discord. I mean, that wasn't the case, and that would be extremely stupid, because when you're a public figure, you don't enter online media and have conversations.
I did think this. That's why when I was looking at it,
you don't do that. But I mean, there was the topic of sex did come up, and I said some things, and the media said that I had conversed about this, and it's true, I did, with people who were of sexual consent age. Okay. And of course the police never even contacted me about this.
Which, if you had, they would.
They would.
Well, so, this is what, in my research, I was looking, because that's why I wanted to sit here and answer this question and put this out, because people would watch it and think, how come you never question him about that?
No, absolutely. And I'm, certainly I should have never talked about that topic at all. Certainly for a political standpoint, that was stupid.
Yep.
But it wasn't really there was no moral violation, and there was certainly no legal violation, okay? So for a PR public relations standpoint, it was stupid, but it was not really something that I had any reason to feel morally bad about, because there were nobody hurt. There were some people who were very angry afterwards, but they were angry at the newspaper, because some of the participants in that conversation were very angry at the way the newspaper described what had happened.
So there was no truth, just to clarify that, so no truth that any of them were under the age of 16?
The age of consent in Denmark is 15. There is no truth to them being under the age of sexual consent.
Okay.
Possibly, I think there was one person who said he had just had intercourse with a woman, and he might have been a few weeks short of 15.
And he's having a discussion about what? About the fact that
he was very proud of this.
Okay, so someone's in a Discord group.
He had to brag about this because he was very happy.
Okay.
I replied with a single comment. Okay.
Okay.
I think that's very normal. I think, what am I supposed to say? I mean, shouldn't he be allowed to be happy about his newfound experience?
What was your comment?
My comment was, no, I think you did it with your friend.
Okay. Banter. So it's banter as such.
Yeah, it's banter. And I mean, he told me afterwards that he was very pissed at the newspaper because what they wrote was not what happened.
Okay, that's all I wanted to understand. Because anyone who would Google that, they've done it against me. You Google my name and I've got stalking prevention order.
Yeah.
So they link me with negative things to do with women. So
I can understand that. So basically, that's what happened, and of course, it had a revival. This was 2 years ago, but it had a revival when the whole Turkey thing happened.
It'll have a revival every time we blow up. What happened with Turkey?
What happened with Turkey?
Yeah.
Well, basically, I ran for parliament in Sweden because it turned out you have to have the whole backstory here.
Yep.
When I was done with the election in Denmark in 19, we were 7,000 votes short of entering parliament. We needed 2%, we got 1.8%. So that was a great disaster, but what can I do? So the next year I figured, okay, well, Denmark is bad, but Sweden is far worse.
Really bad.
Sweden is far worse. So let's try and see what happens if you burn a Quran in Sweden. So let's go to Malmö and see what happens. And the Swedish artist Dan Park, he said, I'll invite you. Okay, I said, well, you'll invite me to come. We'll have a manifestation. We'll see what happens. That was the beginning of the Swedish adventure. And now, of course, that has created the worst security situation in Sweden for 100 years. And I'm not joking. It's really bad.
What, to do with terrorism?
Yeah.
And the Swedish, because I actually went, I don't know if you're aware, there was protests outside the Swedish embassy in London. Many Muslims against you.
Yeah.
I travelled down there just to see what was going on. I just went down there, had a little walk.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, okay.
What's going on? What you hear protesting over? What do you believe? Like, I went there just to have a look. And that was over you. That was over yourself in Sweden. And I believe recently was the Swedish embassy just burned in Iraq.
Absolutely. There was Swedish embassy burned in Iraq, and the consulate general in Istanbul was also attacked, and there's been a lot of that. But basically, in 2020, in August, I planned to do this, and the Swedish police in Scania, which is in Malmö, the region, the southernmost region, they said, no, you cannot do a protest in Rosengård, the ethnic neighborhood in Malmö, no. And then I said, okay, well, here are 10 other places in the entire region I want to do it. And they said, no. You cannot do it anywhere. Okay. Well, then I just want to come and go for a walk in Rosengård, I said. That must be allowed. It's not protest. I'll just go for a walk. Of course, knowing that, me going for a walk there. Okay, well, so what happened was I went with the security police, the bodyguards, to the border, and I was supposed to be handed over to the Swedish bodyguards. Swedish police. Instead, they handed me a decision saying you're now banned from Sweden for 2 years because you're a threat to the national security. And when my chief of staff went, I was brought back to Denmark by the Danish police. My chief of staff was still by the border, and he went to find the police officer and asked, can we go on now? Because he wasn't banned, so he could drive into Sweden. And then he saw 5 Arabs in police uniforms high-fiving each other and laughing behind the shed.
5 Muslims, and there's a video of this.
There's no video of this, unfortunately. Okay. But what happened was they thought that they could, fix it by banning me. And there were 2 problems with that. First of all, after a month, it turned out that through my father, I'd actually been a Swedish citizen with dual citizenship since 1st of June, 89. So they actually broken the Swedish constitution by banning a citizen from entering his own country. So that was a problem, and that was corrected, and that was a bit humiliating for the Swedish government, I guess.
Corrected in what way?
In that the the banning order was lifted, and that they declared that we agree you have actually been a Swedish citizen since 1st of June 89.
So then you was allowed in?
And a Swedish passport as well, yes.
Okay.
So, but the second thing is, I want to sound like I'm very, very smart and I know everything, but on this particular day, it seems like I had my wits about me because I'd actually foreseen that unplanned things could happen, which was what it did. Unplanned things did happen. I was rejected. So because I had an uneasy feeling about the whole thing, I wanted to plan for every contingency.
So you had a plan B, see.
So several hours before I arrived at the border, I had sent in another team with 5 people and a Swedish journalist. And they actually, 2 hours before I arrived at the border, already burned a Quran in the Rosengård borough.
Okay, so you foresaw they'd stop you.
I foresaw that things could,
Yeah.
I didn't foresee that particularly, but I could understand that you never know, okay? You have to plan ahead. So what happened was the news of the fact that the Quran had been burned spread, and then my supporters, both them who were already in there and the one who had been driving with me, they gathered at the big public square in Malmö where they threw the Quran to each other, and eventually some of them were arrested. And those two events combined meant that many people, residents living in the Rosengård area, peacemakers, I guess, rioted the whole night and attacked the police. So at that time, like the biggest riots in years in Sweden, August 2020. And that resulted in me saying, okay, well, now I'm a Swedish citizen. I can actually run for parliament. That's a good idea. So I went on another kind of expedition in 2021, just to start a Swedish sister party and do the preparations and, visit the worst neighborhoods in Stockholm and stuff like that. Not really burning Quran, but still. And then in 2022, I said, well, I'm guessing 5 or 10 of these protests in Sweden and the whole country will burn to hell. That was my prediction. And it happened like at number 9. So pretty accurate. But
What's happened at number 9?
I went a couple of times in February and March. And then I went in the 2nd of April, at the beginning of Ramadan last year. I went to Landskrona, quite a small city in north of Malmö. And they didn't know me. But when I started doing stuff with the Quran, it took 20 minutes and everything went crazy. And I figured, okay, now they know, because that event cannot be silenced. It will spread, even though the media will not report it, it will spread among certain people, okay? And 2 weeks later, Easter, also height of Ramadan. I planned for Easter Thursday, Long Friday, Good Friday, and the entire Easter to do stuff in Sweden. And what happened was I arrived the first city, and it was pretty, dull. The local pastor of the Swedish church, he tried to sabotage my protest by ringing the bells, and they were very proud that there were no riots. I'm like, okay, well, you want a medal? You use vast resources because I come for 1.5 hours, and you want a medal because there are no riots? And I'm like, okay, well, no worries. My point will come across eventually. So I'm like, okay, we'll move on to the next city. Now, that didn't happen, because when I arrived at the next city, we were with the police in the nearby, and we were waiting for us to have the go to go there, to the ethnic borough. And then the police officer comes and he says, we have to drive to another location. And I know police language, so I said, what you mean is we have to drive further away, right? Yeah, that's what he meant. Okay, well, I figured, this is a problem. There were like vast riots, and the police were totally undermanned.
When was this?
This was the 14th of April last year in Linköping, one of the top 10 cities in Sweden.
Okay.
We're talking about worst riots in 20, 30 years in Sweden. And it was so dramatic that when I had waited like an hour after I was supposed to start, I went to the police officer and said, am I banned from entering this neighborhood or not? And he said, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And I said, no. If you don't know, then I'm not banned. So then I can enter, because the only reason I should not enter is if you're telling me that I'm restricted from entering. So now I'm getting my helmet, now I'm getting my vest, and I'm going to the neighborhood. And that's the way
this is the neighborhood that's on fire.
That's the neighborhood that's on fire. And you can see from the video afterwards that, the police are being beaten. They have rocks thrown at them and basically try to kill them. So I put on my helmet and my vest, and then another police car drives up and says, you're now taken into custody for obstructing the peace.
They arrested you.
Well, it's not really an arrest. It's like an administrative thing, but
to prevent something.
Depriving my freedom. Obviously, that was bollocks. And the court afterwards said, you can't deprive someone of their liberty for other people 2 kilometers away throwing rocks at the police.
See, we had exactly this with a demonstration in London with Tower Hamlets, where we took it to the High Court. We spent money. They banned us from entering Tower Hamlets, and the reason was that they couldn't control the Muslim community. Yeah. So we challenged it on democratic, but we lost. Yeah. The court said, no, you're not coming in.
Well, I mean, I guess I lost and won, because then the High Court, the appeals court, they didn't say that it was, they didn't really say that it was right to deprive me of liberty, because I think they knew you can't really say that. They just said that I couldn't appeal in that manner that I did, but they didn't say it was right, because obviously it wasn't. But I asked, am I being suspected of a crime? And the answer was, no, you're not. Okay. So they held me there for like 2 hours, and the problem is the chief of the police station, he has to make the decision. He has to approve it. And he came and said, why are you here? And I said, like, and I could see in his face, like, what the? So then he came after 2 hours and said, well, we decided, you've said now that you're not going there, and you can move on, whatever. And then the next city, the third city that day, of course, I was given an order saying that protest has been denied now. And I said, well, you can't deny it now. And of course, the courts afterwards said, you can't do that. You can't first approve it and then deny it. That doesn't work. But they were they were completely being smashed in that Norrköping as well. So that was Thursday. And then Friday, I went to Rinkeby, which is like Somali town, Mogadishu in Stockholm. And surprisingly, I was actually able to be there for a while. Not without incident, though. I had rocks thrown at me, and the police were also beaten up pretty badly. And then I went to Örebro, which was like the worst of the places, because I was supposed to do that near the mosque in the Vivalla borough. And that was apparently too dangerous, so they tried to change that order to a park, Svea Park in central Örebro. I never went to Svea Park because the police who were there were being subjected to the worst kind of violence Sweden has seen in 30 years. So they were completely overrun and beaten and had rocks thrown at them.
So you made a decision not to go there?
I didn't make that decision. I wanted to go. Okay. But the police said you may not go. Okay.
And what do you say to someone who says that someone would say these are stunts that you're pulling? Obviously you're raising awareness about an issue, but what do you say to the fact that a police officer could get killed on one of those days? What's your defence to that? Well,
I mean, first of all, what is a stunt in the eyes of one person can be a very important political statement in the eyes of another. So that all depends on the eyes that see, really.
Okay.
If a police officer is being killed by someone, then the responsibility of that murder is on the person who kills the police officer.
I agree.
Of course, there is another person who might also be a little bit responsible, and that is if we know that certain people are very likely to kill police officers because of the political statements of third parties, then maybe we should not let those people enter the country. That is a point. And so maybe we should consider, are there people from certain countries that are very, very incompatible with freedom of speech? If that's the case, maybe we should tell them, you're like, I hate freedom of speech. I want to kill people who use freedom of speech in ways I don't like. We're like, yay, freedom of speech. That's not a match. So let's not go into marriage. You just stay in your country and we'll stay in ours. That's a theory. And I think that is the plan that should have been followed in Sweden. And if it had been, then this would never have happened. Because would I ever criticize Islam if there was no Islam in Denmark and Sweden? I think not.
Okay, no, it's just like, I agree, because they want to try and make, no matter what I'm saying or doing in my activism, it's not my fault they want to kill. And if they do want to kill and they kill people, then it should be held. Even now when I see girls getting raped and women getting murdered, whoever's welcomed these people in, you're looking now in Ireland, I'm looking to Angela Merkel and think you are responsible for each of the refugees, or so-called refugees, that's come into Germany, raped and murdered.
Yeah, but it's true. But of course there is one great problem, which can also be an explanation as to why we are not kings of Britain and Denmark. And that is who elected her? I mean, if people have to accept that we're right,
It's our fault. It's the people who.
it's the people's fault.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like the V for Vendetta movie when V is speaking to all the people of Britain, and he says, "And who's responsible? Who made this happen?" Well, certainly there are some that are more responsible than others, and they will have their consequences. But if you're really looking for the people responsible, you need only look into a mirror. And that's the problem, because one thing is to convince people of something new, but to convince them that they're to blame.
It's their fault.
Wow. Okay, that's difficult. And not only you have to convince them that things are shit and that their children will be raped and killed and so forth, but also that they're to blame.
Because they should have done something.
Yeah, that's difficult. Okay, difficult is maybe a small word. It's near to impossible, but. What can you do? You have to tell it like you see it. And what I see is that we have a huge amount of people from elsewhere in Denmark and Sweden who have shown really clearly that they do not subscribe to our values, and that they're willing to use force to fight the values that we have and hold dear. And then we have to have a divorce. And when you have a divorce, one spouse generally is allowed to stay in the common apartment, and one has to move out. And my opinion is that the people who stayed here the longest are the ones who should stay in the apartment. And that would be the Danish and Swedish people, and the other people, the one that we're divorcing, they should move.
I'll just finish this, Rasmus. It's been interesting, but I'll finish this on asking you, really, yourself. You're sacrificing yourself for a belief you must feel very passionately about. I want to ask you where you see yourself. Where you see yourself in 2 years, 5 years. Well, what will the future lie for you, and what will the future lie for Europe and Denmark? Are you disillusioned so much? Are you at that point where are you disillusioned with the public, with the Danes, with the Europeans, as to whether we'll fight for this? Will we fight for freedom? Will they fight for their countries? Will they fight for their children and their women?
I'm very, very disillusioned. And of course, the worst thing that could happen is you pose a great question, so I have to limit my answer because that could be answered in hours. But the greatest threat would be the organic change, which is the slow change. And that would be like the change with the blasphemy law, where you cut away chip. Okay, that's
freedom's gone. 10-year stand.
That's the worst. A better solution would be ride out violent clash.
Bring it to a head.
Yeah.
Before we can't, because otherwise it would get.
The sooner that would happen, the better we would be strategically. Okay.
To someone who's just saying that, listening to that, it could sound like you're advocating for violence.
No, I'm not advocating for violence. I'm warning about violence, okay. and I'm saying that violence will come regardless of what we do. If we have the organic change, then violence will not come in outright battle. It will come in that our children will have to bow and let themselves be raped to new masters. Or if we have the outright clash, there will be people who will die violently, but we might win.
We're running out of time for that solution.
Absolutely, and so far what we saw
the
last
demographical
year,
numbers show.
Yeah. I mean, democracy is destiny, as the saying goes, and that's why the Libyan dictator Gaddafi said we need not conquer Europe with our tanks. We can in the bedroom, right?
We won't even need to raise the sword, he said.
Yeah. So and that was absolutely true. He was very honest, it seems. And right now in Sweden, what has been proven last year is what was blatantly obvious, namely that the Swedish government does not have power, because if it had, it would not bow down. What it did was it put me into custody because I want to do a non-violent legal action, and the people who attacked the police drove the police out of the area. Now, when I interviewed Claire Lopez from the think tank in Washington, D.C., Center for Security Policy in 2018, she said that Islam moves in small slices, so it will be an enclave first. They will set up an enclave first in a country where they now have power, and that will expand. Now, that is what has already happened in Sweden. I'm sure it's happened in the UK as well. And so much of Malmö is now an Islam enclave, really.
And if we agree with Turkey's leader, who's clashed about yourself, then the mosques are their command and control centres.
Yeah, and also the audacity of the fact that I and other people are given arrest warrants in Turkey for actions.
You've got an arrest warrant in Turkey?
Yes, for actions that we have done legally in our own countries. They've issued an arrest warrant. They have issued an arrest warrant for me for what I did in Sweden on the 21st of January this year.
And the level of threat with the security services, could they may have issued a fatwa that you're unaware of?
I think it's safe to say that Al-Qaeda and ISIS and others have issued many fatwas against me and others, but it's just like it shows the vastly different views that people in the world have on reality, that they actually think that we can charge him here in Turkey for a legal action he did in his own country.
Insanity. I think that even people should watch this, and I think that even people who disagree, they might disagree with my politics, your politics, but I don't think anyone can argue that you are not a man who has stood on your beliefs and is still standing on your beliefs. And who knows what you may sacrifice in the future, but I think whether people take inspiration from it. I remember I was in positions where I thought I had to do something that even I didn't want to do because I know people are watching, and I don't want people to lose the battle or the fight. So
that is true. I mean, you can really only be responsible for your own actions, and if that inspires someone else in a good way, that is great, and that's my hope anyway.
I wish you safety.
And you as well.
Yeah. I think you're going to need it. We both will.
Carry on watching for more interesting guests. I'll talk to anyone. I'll debate anyone. I'll hear anyone's story. If you want to help me along that way, it's not free. I need your support. If you can support my family, that gives me my peace of mind. It means I can continue to do the work I do. You can do so at www.supporttommy.com. I appreciate every bit of support, as do my children. It gives me the ability to fly them out here to see me so I can stay in constant contact with them. I'm deplatformed and I'm censored, so I need you. I need you to share this content, and make sure you stay tuned for upcoming weekly guests, interesting guests, exciting guests. I'm Tom Robson, and this has been my podcast, Silence.